Meantime, U.S. tech giant Apple topped estimates after it announced their fiscal second quarter results. It beat on earnings and revenue driven by growth in the company's services business, with China proving a bright spot for a second consecutive quarter. Now, sales for iPhones rose 22% from a year ago, but missed estimates for the second time in 3 quarters. And then sales of Apple's other products, including the Mac, as well as wearable devices, that remain relatively flat. But shares still rose in extended trade on the company's Q3 outlook. Well, Apple initially fell with investors concerned about supply chain constraints, which outgoing CEO Tim Cook said hit iPhone sales. Apple's AI strategy also in focus as it announced plans to release a smarter version of its Siri digital assistant. Analysts also got to hear from Cook's successor, that's John Ternus, as both answered questions during the investor call. For more, we're joined by Bob O'Donnell. He's president and chief analyst at TECHnalysis Research. Bob, thanks for your time today. So just getting a quick overview on how you're interpreting this Q2 results. So the beat on earnings beating estimates, the China business looking pretty good, but in softening in Americas and Europe. Memory chip concerns also being flagged. I mean, from the stock reaction, what's it telling you?
Well, in some ways, Liz, it's kind of like, another boring quarter. Apple does great and they beat everybody's expectations. But we have the intrigue of the supply chain issues overhanging all this. Now, clearly what Apple was able to do, they bought a ton of memory a long time ago, and they were perfectly fine with memory up till now. And what they said is later, second half of the year, things are going to get a lot tighter for them because they're going to start having to reflect the higher prices. But the biggest issue this quarter, interestingly, was actually the fact that they couldn't get their latest processors, not the memory, but the actual processor chips, because so many of the chips, of the supply chain in Taiwan, TSMC in particular, is making chips for NVIDIA and the other big AI players, that Apple couldn't get as many as they wanted. They also apparently underestimated the amount of demand they would have for the new Mac Neo, which also uses some of their latest processors. So those factors, came into play here. But still, at the end of the day, they knocked it out of the park, as they always have. They gave a robust forecast, but they did shadow a little concerns, as I said, towards the second half of the year.
Yeah, so the advanced nanometer semicon nodes. I wonder how much this is going to pose of a structural risk this is going to pose for Apple's future growth. Is there a chance that the crunch could also affect its pricing strategy, maybe the availability as well in a more permanent way going forward?
Well, I don't know if it'll be a permanent way, but it certainly could impact things like the types of configurations they put together. Maybe the standard configuration comes with less memory, but for the same price, or they end up having to, as many other companies already have, raise their prices a bit to reflect those higher costs. Because apparently the latest signs are that memory prices are not coming down, not only this year, even well into next year, we're not going to see a decrease. And so that's a challenge for everybody. Apple's not, unique in being able to avoid that. As I said, they just happen to have a lot of inventory in stock that's allowed them to keep going for a while. But look, they have a lot of other exciting things coming up. The rumored foldable iPhone is supposed to come out this fall after Ternus officially takes over. That'll probably be the first event where he kind of starts the show. So that'll be interesting to watch. Lots of rumblings of other, as you mentioned, the personalized Siri, AI-powered Siri is supposed to come later this year. So they've got a number of things cooking that I think will keep interest in Apple and their products going. And again, the thing about Apple and the reason why their services business is so strong is that builds on this installed base, which now is 2.5 billion devices. It's incredible. Like, that base allows them to do an incredible amount of things. And that's what they're using. They're using those services businesses, which have an enormous margin, by the way, 75, 76% margins for services like Apple TV and the App Store and all this kind of stuff. And that's really driving it forward. And then specifically for Asia, of course, as you said, China, we saw a good quarter from China, which is also very important for Apple.
Yeah, indeed. So we know that China is, the China business is seen as a big part of Apple under Tim Cook's leadership. I couldn't really find much about what John Ternus's relationship with China is like. I was hoping that you could shed more light on that. And another point, since we're on the new CEO, he is a hardware specialist. So what could we see from him? What could we expect from him? Is it going to be more hardware first kind of strategy from Apple?
So a couple of things. First of all, yeah, the question about Ternus in China is a good one. I don't think anybody really knows right now. The fact of the matter is, remember that Tim Cook said, hey, I'm going to stick around. I'm going to be around, and I'm going to do a lot of these global things. And we all know he's very good at doing that. He has a very strong set of relationships in China. So he's going to keep promoting the Apple brand throughout China. And I think that will continue to help the company, at least for the next several years, while he continues to do that. In terms of Ternus, what he's going to do, yes, he has been the hardware guy, and hardware has been driving, that installed base of devices for Apple for a long time. But people are looking for something new. They haven't really had a dramatically new product that's been a hit in quite some time. And so they're looking to see if Ternus can turn that around. But I think it's also important to remember when we think about Ternus as a hardware guy, he's also part of driving an ecosystem of devices. And that means software and interconnect. And so I think, it's easy to just say, oh, well, he's a hardware guy and they really need software. I think he's going to see how he can bring together the various elements, how the watch talks to smart glasses, which talk to your phone, and how AI interacts with all of that. Those are the kinds of things I believe he's going to be focused on. And as an engineer, he's got the capability to help drive those decisions. And I think that's going to be important for the company moving forward.
All right, Bob, we thank you for your time today. Bob O'Donnell, the President and Chief Analyst at TECHnalysis Research.
Thanks.